CDL HazMat Questions and Answers 2026 Endorsement Practice Tests. Flashcard 1. Shipper's package in order to blank hazardous materials. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, contain shipper's package hazardous materials in a way that is meant to completely contain the materials. Vehicles should be placarded to communicate the risk of the cargo. Flashcard 2. How often are hazardous materials employees required to be trained and tested? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, once every 3 years all drivers must be trained in the security risks of hazardous materials transportation. This training must include how to recognize and respond to possible security threats. Hazardous materials employees must be trained and tested at least once every 3 years. Flashcard 3. When applying for an original or renewed HazMat endorsement, you must undergo a background check through which agency? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, the Transportation Security Administration. When applying for an original or renewed HazMat endorsement, you must undergo a federal security threat assessment done by the Transportation Security Administration (TSA). Flashcard 4. If a driver is given a leaking package or shipment, they should think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, refuse it. It is a driver's responsibility to refuse packages or shipments of hazardous materials if they contain leaks. Flashcard 5. A material's hazard class reflects. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, the risks associated with the material. A hazardous material will be placed into one of 9 classes to explain the type of risks associated with the material. Flashcard 6. How do you label a package if the hazardous materials label will not fit onto the package? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, place the label on a tag securely attached to the item. Shippers should place applicable diamond-shaped hazard warning labels on hazardous materials packages. If a label will not fit entirely onto a package, shippers may instead place the label on a tag that is securely attached to the package. Flashcard 7. If inhalation hazard appears on a shipping paper, the shipper should provide which placard? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, poison gas or poison inhalation hazard. If the words inhalation hazard appear on the shipping paper or package, you must display the poison inhalation hazard or poison gas placards as appropriate. Flashcard 8. If a shipping paper describes both hazardous and non-hazardous materials, the hazardous materials may need to be. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, highlighted in a contrasting color. If a shipping paper describes both hazardous and non-hazardous materials, the hazardous materials must be distinguished in one of 3 ways. They must be entered first on the shipping paper, highlighted in a contrasting color, or properly marked with an X in a column titled HM. Flashcard 9. Unless the package is clearly unsafe, a driver needs blank to accept a package. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, the shipper's certification. When a shipper packages hazardous materials, they certify that the package has been prepared according to Hazardous Materials Regulations (HMR). Unless a package is clearly unsafe or not complying with HMR, you may accept the shipper's certification concerning the proper packaging of a material. Flashcard 10. A driver should ensure that. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, the shipping paper matches the markings and labels on packages. It is always a good idea to compare package markings and labels to accompanying shipping papers. Always make sure the shipper has displayed the correct basic description on the shipping paper and has provided the proper labels on the packages. Flashcard 11. A placard should be placed. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, at least 3 inches away from any other markings. A placard must be placed at least 3 inches away from any other markings. The placard should be kept clear of attachments or devices, such as doors and ladders. Placards should always be placed against a background of a contrasting color. Flashcard 12. To know which placard to use, you need to think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is the hazard class of the materials. To determine which placards need to be used, you must know the hazard class of the materials being shipped, the amount of hazardous materials being shipped, and the total weight of all hazardous materials in your vehicle. Flashcard 13. Containers of hazardous materials must be. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is brace to prevent movement during transportation. Containers of hazardous materials should be braced so they will not fall, slide, or bounce around during transportation. Flashcard 14. Class 1, Class 2.1, and Class 3 materials should not be placed in a trailer with. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is a heater. The use of cargo heaters is not always permitted. When transporting materials that are categorized as Class 1 explosives, Class 2.1 flammable gases, or Class 3 flammable liquids, the use of heaters in the same space is generally prohibited. Flashcard 15. If loading corrosive materials, you should not. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is roll the containers. If loading by hand, load breakable containers of corrosive liquid one by one. Keep them facing upright. Do not drop or roll the containers. Flashcard 16. When carrying Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives, your vehicle should not be. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is park within 300 feet of a bridge. Except when parking briefly to perform necessary functions for vehicle operations such as refueling, never park a vehicle carrying Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives within 300 feet of a bridge, tunnel, or building. Never park such a vehicle within 5 feet of the travel portion of the road. Flashcard 17. If you're transporting explosives and your vehicle breaks down, you should notify other drivers. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is with reflective triangles. If your vehicle breaks down while you are transporting explosives and you need to use warning signals, use reflective triangles or red electric lights. Never use burning signals, such as flares or fuses, when transporting explosives. Flashcard 18. If transporting explosives, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is you must have a written route plan. If transporting Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives, you must follow a written route plan. Whenever placarded, avoid heavily populated areas, crowds, tunnels, narrow streets, and alleys. Be sure to research any restrictions that may apply to the routes you plan to take. Flashcard 19. A person should not smoke within blank of a vehicle placarded for Class 3 or Division 2.1 materials. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is 25 feet. You should not smoke within 25 feet of a placarded cargo tank used to transport materials that are categorized as Class 3 flammable liquids or Division 2.1 gases. Do not smoke or carry a lit cigar, pipe, or cigarette near a vehicle containing flammable or explosive materials. Flashcard 20. When refueling a vehicle carrying hazardous materials, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is the engine should be turned off. If you need to refuel a vehicle carrying hazardous materials, you must first turn off the engine. While refueling, someone must be at the nozzle and controlling the fuel flow at all times. Flashcard 21. During a cargo fire, opening the trailer doors may actually cause the fire to expand because doing so. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is allows oxygen into the trailer. When experiencing a cargo fire, it may be a bad idea to open the doors to the trailer. Doing so allows oxygen to enter the area, potentially causing the fire to flare up and expand. Flashcard 22. If you notice a cargo leak, you should identify the leaking hazardous materials by think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is using the shipping papers. If you discover a cargo leak while transporting hazardous materials, use the shipping papers, label, or package location to identify which materials are involved. Do not try to touch or smell the leaking materials to determine what they are because doing so could result in injury or death. Flashcard 23. If you identify hazardous materials leaking while you are driving, you should think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is park the vehicle. If you discover that a cargo of hazardous materials is leaking from your vehicle, you should park the vehicle as soon as possible. The longer you continue driving, the longer the trail of contamination becomes. While this creates potential danger and harm to others, it also increases cleanup expenses. Flashcard 24. Shipping papers identifying hazardous materials should be think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is on the top of a stack of shipping papers. Carriers and drivers must be able to quickly identify hazardous materials. Shipping papers. Shipping papers for hazardous materials should be on the top of a stack of shipping papers. Flashcard 25. When a driver is not in their vehicle, hazardous materials shipping papers should be think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is kept on the driver's seat. Shipping papers for hazardous materials should always be easily accessible. When a driver is not in their vehicle, hazardous materials shipping papers should be left on the driver's seat. Flashcard 26. What should be done if the third column of the hazardous materials table contains the word forbidden? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is the indicated substance should not be transported. The third column of the hazardous materials table lists items, hazard classes, and divisions. Drivers should never transport a material that is marked by the word forbidden. Flashcard 27. Identification numbers, shipping names, and hazard classes. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is should not be abbreviated on a shipping paper. Identification numbers, shipping names, and hazard classes must never be abbreviated when listed on a shipping paper. The only exception to this is if the abbreviation is specifically authorized in the hazardous materials regulations. Flashcard 28. On a shipping paper, if the letter G appears in column 1, what else needs to appear? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is the technical name of the hazardous material. If the letter G, for generic, is written in column 1 of a shipping paper, the technical name of the associated hazardous material must also be listed. Flashcard 29. Generally, a shipping paper must list. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is an emergency response telephone number. In general, a shipper is required to list an emergency response telephone number on hazardous materials shipping papers. There are some exceptions to this rule. Flashcard 30. Emergency response information provided by the shipper must include. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is any risks of fire or explosion. At a minimum, emergency response information must include the basic descriptions and technical names of the materials being transported, immediate hazards to health, risks of fire or explosion, immediate precautions to be taken in the event of an accident or incident, immediate methods for handling fires, initial methods for handling spills or leaks in the absence of fires, and preliminary first aid measures. Flashcard 31. A person attending a placarded vehicle may be. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is within 100 feet of the vehicle. A person attending a parked placarded vehicle must be either awake inside the vehicle or they must be within 100 feet of it. If not inside the vehicle itself, the person must have a clear view of the vehicle. The person attending may not be inside the sleeper berth. Flashcard 32. In general, when loading a tank with flammable liquids, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: a ground should be established before opening the filling hole. Before loading or unloading a tank with flammable liquids, you should turn off the engine, unless running the engine is necessary to operate a pump. Ground the tank before opening the filling hole and maintain the ground until after closing the filling hole. Flashcard 33. If there is a collision involving a vehicle transporting Class 1 explosives, the driver should think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: remove the explosives from the vehicle before separating the vehicles involved in the collision. If you are driving a vehicle that is transporting Class 1 explosives and it is involved in an accident, you should warn others of the danger, keep bystanders away, and not allow smoking or open fires near the vehicle. Before separating the vehicles involved in the collision, remove all explosives and place them at least 200 feet away from the vehicles and any occupied buildings. Flashcard 34. If a leak is suspected in a cargo of radioactive material, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: the driver should not operate the vehicle until it has been cleaned. If you are transporting radioactive material and believe there is a leak or broken package in your cargo, you should tell your dispatcher or supervisor as quickly as possible. Do not touch or inhale the material. Do not use the vehicle until it has been cleaned or checked with a survey meter. Flashcard 35. While driving, shipping papers should be: think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: within reach. While hazardous materials are being transported, shipping papers should either be kept in a pouch in the driver's side door or in another location where the driver is able to easily reach them while their seat belt is fastened. The papers must be clearly visible to anyone who is entering the cab. Flashcard 36. When approaching a railroad crossing while transporting chlorine, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: you must stop before crossing the tracks. If transporting any amount of chlorine, a driver must always stop at a railroad crossing 15 to 50 feet from the nearest track, regardless of the presence of a train. Flashcard 37. If cargo containing hazardous materials is leaking but the driver does not have access to a phone, they should think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: send someone else for help. If a cargo of hazardous materials begins to leak, do not move your vehicle any more than safety requires. If you continue to drive, an even larger area will become contaminated. Instead, you should park your vehicle, secure it, stay with the vehicle, and contact the proper emergency personnel. If you do not have access to a phone, you should send someone else to get help. Flashcard 38. A person supervising the loading of a tank, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: must stay within 25 feet of the tank. The loading and unloading of a tank must be watched by a qualified person. They must be alert, have a clear view of the tank, stay within 25 feet of the tank, know the hazards of the materials involved, know the procedures to follow in an emergency, and be authorized and able to move the tank if necessary. Flashcard 39. If transporting a package that contains radioactive materials, it is important to know that think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: radiation will pass through to other packages. Radiation surrounds packages of radioactive materials and passes through to other nearby packages. To address this, the number of radioactive packages that can be loaded together is limited. Flashcard 40. When driving a vehicle with empty cargo tanks that are used to carry hazardous materials, the driver think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is: must stop at railroad crossings before proceeding. A vehicle with tanks that are used to transport hazardous materials must always be stopped before being driven over railroad tracks, even if the tanks are empty. Flashcard 41. Portable tanks. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, are not permanently attached to a vehicle. Cargo tanks remain on a vehicle at all times, regardless of whether or not they are carrying cargo. Portable tanks are bulk packaging and are not permanently attached to a vehicle. Flashcard 42. The identification numbers assigned to chemicals can be found. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, in the DOT Emergency Response Guide. Information about hazardous chemicals is found in the Emergency Response Guide ARG provided by U.S. Department of Transportation DOT. The ARG is indexed by the proper shipping names and identification numbers of substances. Flashcard 43. The only way to properly check tire pressure is by, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, using a tire pressure gauge. You should examine your tires at the beginning of every trip and after every stop to ensure that they are properly inflated. The only acceptable way to check tire pressure is to use a tire pressure gauge. Flashcard 44. If transporting chlorine, what must be in the vehicle? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, a gas mask. A driver transporting chlorine in cargo tanks must have an approved gas mask in the vehicle, as well as an emergency kit for controlling leaks in dome cover plate fittings on the cargo tank. Flashcard 45. The identification number associated with a hazardous material should appear. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, on the material's packaging. A material's ID number must appear on its accompanying shipping paper as well as on its packaging. It must also appear on cargo tanks and other bulk packaging. Flashcard 46. When transporting Division 1.1 materials, the floor liner should be, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, made from non-ferrous materials. Use a floor lining when transporting Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 materials. The floors should be tight and the liner must be made from either non-metallic material or non-ferrous metal. Non-ferrous metals are metals that do not contain iron or iron alloys. Flashcard 47. Which type of material may be required to have a transport index? Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, radioactive. Some radioactive materials are required to be accompanied by a transport index. A transport index is a number that indicates how much control the material will require during transport. The total transport index of all cargo in a single vehicle may not exceed 50. Flashcard 48. Your engine runs a pump used during the delivery of compressed gas. After delivery, you should turn off the engine blank, unhooking the hoses. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, before, unless your engine runs a pump for product transfer, turn it off when loading or unloading a compressed gas tank. If you do use your engine to run a pump, you should turn the engine off after the product transfer, but before unhooking the hoses. Flashcard 49. Placarded vehicles must carry fire extinguishers with a minimum rating of, think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, 10B:C. The power unit of a placarded vehicle must be equipped with a fire extinguisher with an Underwriters Laboratories OL rating of 10B:C or more. Flashcard 50. If transporting explosives, you may leave your vehicle unattended. Think of the answer before the reveal. The answer is, in a safe haven. When transporting hazardous materials, you may leave your vehicle unattended in a safe haven. A safe haven is a location that has been approved for parking unattended vehicles that are loaded with explosives.